There's a chapter Napoleon Hill almost didn't write. Not because he ran out of ideas, not because his publisher asked him to cut it, but because the men who gave him their secrets, the richest, most powerful men in America, told him some things were never meant for the public. Think and Grow Rich has sold over 100 million copies. It's been called the most important success book ever written. Presidents quoted it, billionaires dog-eared it. And yet, the people who study Hill most obsessively, the researchers, the historians, the deep readers, will tell you the same thing. The most important part of his work is the part most people never find. Here's what almost nobody talks about. When Hill spent 20 years interviewing over 500 of the wealthiest people in history, Andrew Carnegie, Henry Ford, Thomas Edison, John D. Rockefeller, he wasn't just collecting tips about goal setting and positive thinking. He was uncovering a pattern, a force, something that showed up again and again in the lives of every extraordinary person he studied. And that force made him uncomfortable. Because it wasn't about money, it wasn't about discipline or hard work or waking up early. It was something far more primal, far more misunderstood, and in the early 20th century, far more dangerous to talk about openly. Hill called it sex transmutation, and the chapter he wrote about it, chapter 11 in the published book, is the most skipped, most misread, most dismissed chapter in the entire text. Most people glance at the title, assume it's about something inappropriate, and flip past it. Or they read it quickly, feel vaguely confused, and move on to the next principle. That is a mistake that may have cost you more than you realize. Because what Hill discovered wasn't just a curiosity, it was the engine underneath everything else. Let's slow down and actually look at what he was saying. Hill believed that sexual energy is the most powerful creative force available to a human being. Not the most powerful physical force, the most powerful creative force. He watched it show up in the lives of every great achiever he studied. He wrote that no person reaches the highest levels of achievement without first understanding this energy and learning to redirect it. Transmutation is an old word. It means transformation, changing one form of energy into another. The idea is this: the same emotional intensity, the same biological drive, the same burning desire that fuels physical attraction, that energy doesn't have to be expressed in only one way. It can be redirected, channeled, converted into creative output, into obsessive focus, into the kind of relentless energy that builds empires. Hill noticed that the most driven men he interviewed weren't cold or detached. They were intensely emotional, passionately alive. They burned with something. And many of them told him in private that the source of that burning wasn't ambition alone, it was this deeper, more animal force, transformed. But here's what nobody tells you. Hill didn't just describe this principle abstractly. He gave you the mechanism. He said that this transmutation happens through the emotion of desire combined with the use of imagination. You take that raw electric energy, and instead of letting it dissipate, you feed it directly into your work, your vision, your creative problem solving. When you are deeply moved by something, your brain enters a different state. Your subconscious mind becomes more receptive. Ideas start flowing that wouldn't come during a calm, rational afternoon at your desk. Hill was describing in 1937 what neuroscience would later confirm. Heightened emotional states activate regions of the brain associated with creativity and pattern recognition. The prefrontal cortex loosens its grip. Connections form that logic alone would never allow. The men who built the modern world weren't just smarter than everyone else. They were more emotionally activated, more intensely alive to possibility. If this resonates with you, consider subscribing, and the deeper we go into this material, the more useful it gets. Now here's where the story gets even more interesting. Hill hinted, repeatedly, carefully, that there was more to this chapter than he felt free to say. He wrote in coded language. He used phrases like, "the secret behind the secret." He told readers that those who were ready would understand, and those who weren't would dismiss the chapter entirely. He was right on both counts. What he was circling around, without ever saying directly, was this: the relationship between a man's sexual and emotional life and his external achievements isn't incidental. It isn't a side note, it is the central variable. Look at the lives of the people Hill studied. Edison worked maniacally until he was exhausted. Then he would sleep anywhere, on a lab bench, on the floor, wake up, and start again. He described inspiration as something that visited him, something that came through him rather than from him. Ford talked about connecting to a force he didn't fully understand. Carnegie built an entire philosophy around what he called the mastermind. The idea that when a group of people come together with shared purpose and genuine emotional investment, they tap into something greater than the sum of their individual intellects. Hill believed all of these men were, knowingly or not, practicing transmutation. They had learned to stay in a state of heightened creative energy, And the source of that energy was never purely intellectual. Now think about your own life for a moment. Think about the last time you were genuinely, unreservedly excited about something. Not just interested, not just motivated in a surface-level way, but truly lit up. The kind of feeling where time disappeared, where you forgot to eat, where your mind raced ahead of your hands. What were you doing? What did that feel like? That state, that exact neurological and emotional state, is what Hill was pointing at. And his argument was that most people experience it only accidentally. They stumble into it occasionally, then lose it. They wait for the right project to show up, the right inspiration to strike, the right circumstances to align. But the people who consistently achieve extraordinary things have learned to generate that state deliberately, to cultivate it, to protect it. And the way you protect it, Hill argued, is by being ruthlessly selective about where you direct your energy. Every time you scatter your focus, every time you drain your emotional reserves on things that don't matter, every time you let that electric creative force dissipate without purpose, you pay a price you can't see on any balance sheet. This is the part that modern productivity culture gets completely wrong. We've been taught to manage our time, but the real resource isn't time. The great achievers Hill studied weren't working with more hours than you have. They were working with more intensity, more focused emotional energy, more of that transmuted creative fire. And the forbidden truth, the thing that made this chapter dangerous, the thing that made Hill hedge and speak in riddles, is that this energy isn't morally neutral. It's not just about redirecting a biological drive into work. It's about understanding that you are, at your core, a creature of enormous creative power. That the same force that creates life, literally, is the same force that creates everything else. Art, business, science, philosophy, love. It all draws from the same well. When you treat yourself like a machine that needs better inputs, you miss this entirely. When you manage your calendar and optimize your habits and follow the latest productivity framework, but you never address the question of what truly sets you alive, you are rearranging furniture in a dark house. The light switch is the energy Hill was describing. Here's what I want you to take from this. You already have everything you need to operate at a completely different level. Not someday, not after the right opportunity, the right mentor, the right financial situation. You have it right now, today. The capacity for that burning, focused, creative intensity exists inside you already. It has always been there. What Hill discovered wasn't a trick or a technique. It was a recognition. A reminder that the most powerful force in your life has been there all along, waiting to be directed. The question has never been whether you have enough talent, enough intelligence, enough resources. The question is always the same. Question Hill spent 20 years researching. What are you doing with your energy? Where is your fire going? Because here's the hard truth. Scattered energy produces scattered results. Unfocused desire produces wishful thinking. But when you gather that force, when you stop leaking it in 100 directions and point it at a single worthy target, something shifts. Something that looks a lot like luck begins to happen. Opportunities start appearing. The right people show up. Ideas arrive that feel like gifts. Hill called it the secret behind the secret. Carnegie called it the great mystery. Edison pointed at it without naming it. You already know what it feels like. You felt it before. The only question left is whether you're willing to feel it on purpose. Starting right now, today, this moment, stop waiting for the right conditions to ignite you. Decide what is worth your full fire, and then give it everything you have, without apology, without reservation, without holding anything back for a safer version of the life you actually want. That is the chapter Napoleon Hill wasn't sure the world was ready for. Maybe you are.